Learn a Blatt Gemara. We are up to Daf Chav Vav. Quick summary. We were talking about Pemed. Pemed is when water is sitting with grape seeds, let's say, or according to Tesis, we're talking about maybe the sediments and of the wine, and water is sitting there in the grape sediment. So we're talking about actually the grape seeds. Not just whole grapes, grape seeds and water, does it take on the status of wine or the status of water? So we said, if it didn't ferment, it is considered water, and therefore, if you take Ma'aser Sheni money and you buy water, you cannot buy water with Ma'aser Sheni money. So therefore, the kedusha remains with the money. It's only if you buy food or fruits, things that come from another peri or from beef, and that comes from a mother, and so on. And the same token, when it comes to a mikveh, it's treated like water, even though it's sitting with grapes. It's treated like water, and because it's treated like water, if 3 loigen of drawn water is put into mikveh that does not have yet 40 saw, it's 40 saw, and you put in these 3 loigen of water, it ruins the mikveh completely. You can never fix it up. And the Gemara wants to know who the author of the Mishnah is, and we said there's an argument between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. The argument to Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim is that according to Rabbi Yehuda, we had an argument similar. What happens? You put in a certain amount of water with the grapes, and you take out exactly the same amount of water. Even though according to Chachamim, the water is exactly the same, nothing to talk about. It's water. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he says that since it now tastes like wine, it has a din of wine. So we concluded. Rav Nachman said that when does Rabbi Yehuda and the Chacham argue? Only if it fermented. But if it didn't ferment, everyone agrees it's only water, even though it's sat with grapes, it's only water. And therefore, it'll have the din of water. Our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yehuda. So we're up to the top of the page, 2 lines on top. But even though at the current state, if it's water, if eventually it ferments, then we'll say it's retrospective, since the water is already sitting in the grapes, and that means it already started becoming wine, just we didn't complete the job yet, so it's retrospective that it has a status of wine. I mean, even though we just concluded that if it's only that actually hechmitz, it's not yet, if it didn't yet ferment, it's only water, but if eventually it ferments, then it's retrospective. Says temed, that this water is sitting in the grape seeds. If you bought it with Ma'aser Sheni money, so at this stage it's water, right? But then later on, it fermented. Kana you are kind. The Ma'aser is kind. Why? It's retrospective. Because it fermented later, we say it becomes retrospective. And my timer, and what's the reason? It shows that all along it was paid, and therefore, Navos, it didn't yet complete the job, but already started. So it's like a Yech Bredo or a Gloya Milsa because it already started. It's not something that happened later, revealed before. It already became a paid. The water considered paid. The Mishnah clearly says we have to wait until it turns. The Mishnah says clearly you have to wait until it ferments. Why do you have to wait until it ferments? Most of them will ferment, so therefore it should be retrospective, and we should be machmer that that by mikveh we should say it's possible. Maybe if you would have waited, it would have become what do you call it? It would have fermented. Our Mishnah is talking about a case where you actually saw that it never fermented. We're in the middle of the page. So we have here that the Rabbah, that Rav Nachman came along and said, name Rabbi Ravu, that even though we just finished saying that the home machlekes Rabbi Yehuda Chacham is of the water that's sitting there with the grape seeds, when it ferments, but whether it has a din of water or wine is a machlekes. But even if it's a state of water, if it ferments eventually, then it's retrospective that it always fermented according to Rabbi Yehuda, and it has a status, even though there's no extra, because the exact same amount of water you put in is what you take out. Since it tastes like water, the wine, it's a retrospective and it becomes like wine, which means that if you bought Ma'aser Sheni money, you use the Ma'aser Sheni to buy it, the kedusha of the Ma'aser Sheni money transferred to the wine, the Ma'aser Sheni money is no longer Ma'aser Sheni. And if you learn, and in the case of a mikveh where you're missing a little bit of water, and you put 3 loigen of this particular water in there, it has a status of wine and it doesn't ruin the mikveh. Okay, comes along Rava says no. I can tell you that our Mishnah is not Rabbi Yehuda, not the Chachamim. We learned yesterday there's an argument between the Chachamim. If you say amount of water comes out, according to the Chachamim, same amount of water comes out, nothing. I don't care about the flavor, nothing happens. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's considered paid. Entire water is considered wine. Comes along the road, and then we had a problem. What about our Mishnah? So you decided that our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda, Chachamim are only arguing the case where it actually fermented, and then whether it has a din of wine or not. I'll tell you that our Mishnah is a third authority altogether. The sugi we learned in Makkos, the beginning of Makkos. What's that? Rabba, Hamani Rabbi Yechid ben Noiri. This follows Rabbi Yechid ben Noiri. That now we learned in the Mishnah, and the big machlek is showing them how to learn the first part of the Mishnah. Basically, it goes as follows. We said before, 3 loigen, if you have a mikveh less than 40 so, and 3 loigen of water fall into that mikveh of mayim she'uvin, drawn water, it ruins the mikveh. You can add as much rainwater as you want afterwards. The mikveh is possible. If it was less than 40 saw, like, and what completed the 40 saw, this gimel loigen has to be 3 loigen of water. What happens? You have 2.9 loigen of water, and then you have a little bit of wine in there. What happens? You have 2.9 loigen of water, and you have a little bit of milk in there. So according to Chachamim, the fact is you don't have 3 loigen of water. I don't care when you have wine, then maybe it looks a bit reddish. I can understand it doesn't look like water, but you have milk in 2.9 liter thing. It'll look like water. Chacham say we don't look at looks. All we care about is the must. We care about the measure, about what it is, what it actually is. That's the version that Rashi learns over here, because there's another version that learns according to Chachamim that even if it's 3 loigen of water, if there's wine in it and it looks like wine, according to Chachamim, also it would not be treated like water. Because Chachamim hold, according to that opinion, you need 2 things: chazosha, you need the look, and you need the shear. But the way we learn here, and most of the time learn is, we don't, if Dafka talking about it's less than 3 loigen, all we care about is the shear. All we care about the thing itself. We don't care about appearances, taste, nothing. So let's learn the Mishnah the way I just told you. Now we learn the Mishnah. Gimel loigen mayim chazakot on the page. You have 3 loigen of water minus a drop. So you have less than 3 loigen, you have less than the shear, and a little bit of wine fell in there. So the problem obviously is, first of all, you don't have 3 loigen of water, plus it looks like wine, a little bit reddish. Of course, it's not water. But the chiddush is further. It's like loizu avzu. Gimel loigen mayim chasar kodesh chalav. A little bit of milk fell in there. A minute amount of milk in 2.9 loigen, say water, it looked like water. So it looks mamish like water. And nevertheless, you don't have the quantity of water because you're missing a drop from the gimel loigen. It's not water. It doesn't pass on the mikveh. That's a chachamim. But Rabbi Yechid ben Noiri says, "Hakol hoylech achar hamara." All we care about is looks. So in the case of the milk, it looks like water. That's water, and we'll passel the mikveh. So according to Rabbi Yechid, we don't care if it ever ferments. It doesn't ferment. All we care about is the looks. Okay, about the looks. Yeah. Sorry?
I can't escape from this mishpat. I came here for something a little different.
Okay. And so what? Lav Amar Rabbi Yechid will say, Basar Chazoisa Slin. All we care about is the looks. If it looks like wine, it looks like water. Is Hachanam here also Zil Basar Chazoisa? Over here also, you look after look. In the case of Temet, I don't care. You ask me a question, but of tomorrow it'll ferment. If it'll ferment, and it should be retrospective. Why does the Mishnah say over here only if it actually fermented? So he says here, Zil Basar Chazusa v'Taima. We look right now. What does it look like, and what does it taste like? So Kolzman, it didn't ferment. It tastes like water. It looks like water. Once it fermented, it tastes like wine, and that's our Mishnah. Not the Chachamim who hold in all cases it's water. It's the same amount. Not according to Rabbi Yehuda that says that even if it's only water, if it will ferment, it's retrospective. This is Rabbi Yechid. We look at it now. What is this situation? Does it look like water? Does it not look like water? The time is a Haimayan needs water. Says the Gemara, and all of this, Pliga Rabbi Elazar, this what Rab Nachman said on top of the page. The whole argument of Yehuda is only if it did ferment. But Kolzman, it didn't ferment. Everyone agrees that it's only water, unless we later on it ferments, then it's retrospective. But if later on it doesn't ferment, right now it's only water, that argues Rabbi Elazar. Because Rabbi Elazar is going to hold that Rabbi Yehuda holds that even if it did not ferment, since it's sitting in grape seeds, it's considered like wine. Well, we don't know. How do we? What's this? Rabbi Elazar said, "Hakamaydim." Everyone agrees she'ein mafrishin olav memakam acher elim ken hichmitz. Even Rabbi Yehuda, so this is Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Yehuda argues the Chachamim. He holds that even if it did not ferment, nevertheless, it could be its wine. It could be its wine. Even if it's not fermented, it could be its wine. So Rabbi Yehuda paskins that you have to give meiser and truma and meiser from it, from this water. But you cannot give from another chtiv of truma meiser on this, or even from another.
This is masupik?
Exactly. Because it's masupik, could be, right now you have a chiv, but could be that tomorrow will never be machmetz, it'll never ferment, which means it was never chayiv. That means never is this, the whole word is because of pri, it's like wine, but it turns out to be it's not wine. So if you're going to give this on something else or something else on this, you're doing from something which is potter on something which is chayiv, and there's no chalois of truma here at all. So therefore, when Rabbi Yehuda says that you have to give truma ma'aser from this temet, even shaloi hechmetz, even though it didn't ferment, it's from within itself. So you can't go wrong. There's no manushach. If it turns out to be a cham, then just truma ma'aser. But then it didn't. There's no problem. You gave it to a kohen, so at least something which is not truma ma'aser. No big deal. Elgen hechmitz, somebody holds below hechmitz, it clearly holds below hechmitz machlekes only from within itself, because we're not 100% sure how it'll turn out. Not from something else. Because you might then take from something like takachayv and you can be mafresh it on something here which turns out to be potted. Or something that turned out to be potted on something chayiv, and therefore it's no good. We learned in the Baraisa this temet actually hechmitz before it fermented. Now, we know that in a mikveh, a person or kalim that become tamei go to mikveh and they become tar. Food and drink that become tamei, you cannot be metayired, except water. But not that we're metayired the water. What happens, water is called hashaka, kissing. So you put, let's say, a pot of water, of tamadika water, into this immerse it in the mikveh, and the top of the water comes in contact with the water of the mikveh, and they sort of join, and the water now becomes totally bottled to the mikveh, and that's how you metayir, that's how you purify the water. It's called hashaka. So the Braisa says here, Atemet, actually hechmid, before it fermented, we'll treat it like water, is mashika mimayim. So therefore it's water. So all you do is like our Mishnah says, you attach it to the mikveh and it becomes tired. But misha hechmid, once it's fermented, it has a status now of wine. And wine you cannot be metired. Is a mashika mimayim, and you can no longer do this hashaka business. Amar Rabbi says, Rabbi, when is this said? This is what Rabbi said, and the Gemara is going to question it. The water originally was tar, this water in this pot, and then it became tamei. You immerse it in the mikveh. That's how you do hashaka. Aval tamei mikar. If the water was tamei, came from a source that was already tamei. You put it in the pot, then you put the mikveh. There's no hashaka. Loy. A new chiddush now. When do we say that water hashaka can purify it? Is if water was started out originally tar and then became tamei. Also, Rabbi Givia from the city of Beit Kosel went to Ravashi. Said to Ravashi, and he said, I don't understand. I don't understand the svara of Rabba. Why should be a difference? I can understand what he thinks, but then it doesn't make sense. Why is there a difference? What does he think? Remember, it's the top of the water that touches the mikveh, right? Because otherwise the water is sitting in a pot, in a bucket, whatever it is, and then the top of it, you miss a little bit, is coming in contact with the water mikveh and joins one.
What I'm claiming
came from a source that was tummy, and then you put it in this cup. So it was very tummy before it went into this cup. Sorry?
That's why a person touched it.
Or that, when you cut it, before you
before it went into the pot.
Doesn't mean
Yeah.
the original source of the water. It means when you got it.
Yeah, but before you put it into this, whatever,
the
cup.
pasta traga was stomach.
Now, the word l'chayda is, go like this. So, Rashi said, Rashi, I don't understand. Where is it? Yeah. Why is it that if it chatchila was tamei deloy, why if it's chatchila tamei? And let's say we say it doesn't work. I mean, we say I need the maya yikari. Water is heavier than, let's say, a little bit of the water became a little bit of wineish. The water is heavier than the little bit of wine that's sitting on top. So the maya yikari, the water is heavy, and shechana tatoi, so that rests on the bottom of the cup. Upedi kafim malil, and the pedi swims above. and therefore Malil, and that's why we say, look. So what's coming in contact with the mikveh? The little bit of wine that's there is coming in contact with the mikveh, and there's no hashaka when it comes to other mashkin, only with water. All the water sitting below the top of the line. Even the halachically we say that this water is considered, is considered water. He's like this. It doesn't work. So let's say it was Torah became the Nami, same problem. Even if it was Torah originally, this water that you sat there with the grape seeds and everything else, even though the water originally was Torah, it's the same issue. What's the chilik? Same issue that the only part that was hashaka is the top, and the top has the little bit of wine on the top. So what are you saying here? Ella, must be the reason why if it was originally, if it was tummy originally, it doesn't work is because mavavle, everything got mixed up together. Sorry, if the water was tired from the beginning, even though there's a wine floating on top, why do we say there's hashaka? Because all the water gets mixed up. You don't say that the fruit part of it is floating on top. No, it all got mixed up. No, even if it was tummy lechatchila, what's the chilik if legally it was tummy before? It's a legal question. It's not a Mesidic question. It's not a substantial question. So why should there be a difference if it's tummy mikor or not? Now, the next few missions have none to do. Sorry?
There's no answer.
No. So they refute what he said. No difference. The next few missions have nothing to do with Chulin at all, but we're talking about the idea of one place works this, other place works this. This is like we had in Ksubis, third page. Any age girl that you can sell under 12 years old ain't knas. If somebody abuses them, there's no penalty, because penalty is only by a naira. A night is over 12. The chomok is knas. If there's knas over 12, ain't mecher, then you can't sell. A girl over 12 years old, you can't sell. This action, this was a matter of the what. I come up and she has mecher. Ein knas, he holds there's no knas by a ketana. If somebody abuses a ketana, a young girl under 12 years old, you have to pay money to the father. The Tanya, we actually learned in the Braise. A young girl from a day old until 12 years old, a father has a right to sell her as a slave. The ain knas, but there's no penalty if somebody is ma'anis her, rapes her, or seduces her. Once she's 12 years old, or 6 months as a naira, knas, the penalty if you abuse her, but you can't sell her. The Chachamim say, they all know. Once she's 3 years old, Rawul Labia, there is knas. The psula no longer come back. So there's knas if somebody rapes her or seduces her. And there's also mecha between 3 and 12. Yeshla knas. So you want to ask a question, knas in mechaloi, but there's only knas what you can't sell from 3 to 12. Ema af knas b'mokem. They're overlapping. There is knas because there's knas from the age of 3. Mecher is from a day old till 3, but Knas kicks in at 3, and Mecha stops at 12, and Knas continues until 12 and a half. Kol Mokum, so our mission follow me. Next mission, Kol Mokum sheyesh me, and a girl who was married off by her father under 12, she's married Mahatoida. A father has a right, there's beating Osati Lishazeh. But a mother or the siblings, they marry her off, is only midrabanan, so she should have a family, and she has a right to walk away. Me and walking away, there's no get, there's no nothing, there's no stigma, nothing else till she's 12 years old. After 12, that's it. She herself solidified that kedushin. So kol makash yesh meaning with this means under 12 ain't chalitza. If she's a ktana can't do chalitza, katna ktana cannot do chalitza. You got to wait till over 12 years old. And if she's over 12 is chalitza, then ain't mean. There's no longer mean. That's it. You have to have a proper divorce. Amar Avida says these was a mer. Abacham say yesh mean the makal chalitza. Some say there is mean where chalitza works. The Tanya we learned in the Braisa. Ad Mosai habas mamenes. Until what age can a girl be mamayin? Achet tovish teisai. We say till 12. Those are the words of Rameir. However, Rabbi Yehuda says, Achiyar behashachar al-lavan, not 12. A bit older than that when the hair is longer than the skin underneath. In other words, the hair can fold back. It's a bit over 12 years old. So our Mishnah follows Rameir. 2 Mishnahs we follow Rameir. Next Mishnah, again, totally unrelated. Before Shabbos on Friday afternoon, we learned more Shabbos second payday. They used to blow shofars to tell first few shofars till people come back from the fields, and then they had 3 sets of shofars, and then come back from the close up your stores. It's Erev Shabbos. We got to get ready. Like you go to Crown Heights and other places, you have these sirens that remind you just also that it's time to look mention. Give you a few sirens, a few notices before. So kol makom sheyesh tkiya, whenever you do tkiya, which is erev Shabbos, ain't havdalah. You don't do havdalah. You don't make havdalah going from a weekday to a Shabbos. You make kiddush. The kol makom sheyesh havdalah and motzei Shabbos, where you do havdalah, then ain't tkiya. You don't blow anything. You don't blow to tell you what's coming on because if you go from a kedusha to not a kedusha, you don't blow. What about Yom Tov Shecholi better Shabbos? It's already Yom Tov on Friday. There's then and Cyrus, you wouldn't be doing a lot of things. Nevertheless, toikin, we blow the shofar, but v'loy mavdilin. Why? You're not mavdil again because Shabbos is stricter than Yom Tov, and you don't do havdalah when you're going into something stricter than something less. Havdalah is from Shabbos to a weekday. You're going from something chomer to something light, but not the other way around. So therefore, Yom Tov falls out of Shabbos. You still blow the shofar to remind people Shabbos is coming in. Because certain malachas you're allowed to do on Yom Tov, you're not permitted to do on Shabbos, like malachas oichel nefesh for food. So you have to remind people. So you blow, but you don't do Havdalah. But Motzei Shabbos, mavdilin, if Yom Tov falls out on a Sunday, you do yak nahaz. You make Havdalah, the late taking, but you don't blow because nobody did any work on Shabbos. There's no work that you can do on Shabbos that you're now doing Yom Tov. So therefore, there's no point in blowing. Hates and Mavdilin, what's the language you use by Havdalah from Shabbos to Yom Tov? Hamavdil ben kodesh lekodesh. You say, because Yom Tov is also holy. You say, Hamavdil ben kodesh lekodesh. Baptista says, no, ben kodesh chamur lekodesh kal. You're right, they're both kodesh, but it's a big difference between Shabbos, you can't do any malacha, and you get skilla, and on Yom Tov, you can do malachas oichel nefesh, things that you need for consumption. Says the Gemara, first of all, how do you blow when you're going from Yom Tov to Shabbos? He said Yom Tov falls on a Friday. How do you blow? You blow. You do it different than a normal Friday. You blow. You do tkiya trua. You go straight. You segue straight from the tkiya. You don't make even a break. Normally on a Friday you do a tkiya, then you do a trua, and you make a break. Here, you don't make a break at all. Forget about breathing. We're talking about you don't make a break. You go, the same sound that's doing the tkiya continues on and becomes a trua. Rav Ashi says no. You still make a break, but you don't breathe in between. So when we say you don't breathe in between, like by tkiya, so when we do with tkiya, the miyushiv, by between the true and the shvarim, when we say you don't breathe in, it doesn't mean that you go straight in. You can still pause. In fact, you should pause, but you just don't take a breath. Okay, that's the argument. Iskin Rabbi Yisrael made a takana in the city of Hutzel Kishmaite, like he ruled a what? That you do make a break between the key and through it, but you don't breathe in between. Makes sense. A question. Because on Yom Tov you're allowed to do malachas oichel nefesh.
But why do you need a different one than a regular?
Because a normal weekday, you should remember it's Yom Tov today. You should remind yourself also, you might forget it's Yom Tov. If you hear the key, it's something, it's a weekday, and you'll forget, because every Friday you hear the same sound. No, Yom Tov on a Friday, you might forget that it's Yom Tov and do things. Basically, that's the question. How many Israelis do you see come to America and they carry on Shabbos? Because they don't know what it means not carrying. You get used to things. So that's what happened. Oh, you remember, the keys, I remember I have to turn all the lights off in the house before Shabbos, or turn this on. Basically, that's a question. Yom Tov shecholi is be'erev Shabbos. Yom Tov falls on erev Shabbos. Toikin v'loy merin says you do tkiya. You don't do trua. My love, loy merin klal. Both of you said that you do tkiya and trua. The question is only in one go or one breath. It says clearly you don't do trua at all. Rabbi Yehuda metala tamei, but Rav says each one of them will interpret the Braisa according to their view. That what the basic idea is that it's different than a normal Friday. You don't do trua on its own. You go tkiya and you turn the sound into a trua. And Rabasi will answer, you don't do two breaths. You don't do a breath in between. One breath you do both the tkiya and the trua, but you definitely make a pause in between. Shabbos, we said you say kodesh l'kodesh. Heicha amalei. How exactly? When do you say it? At the end of the bracha baruch to Hashem, hamavdil ben kodesh l'kodesh, or even the beginning when you start doing that, all the havdalas, you start hamavdil ben kodesh l'kodesh. Amar Rabbi Yehuda b'chasi mosa. You only do it at the end. You start hamavdil ben kodesh l'chol, because we need havdalas, 7 havdalas. We need havdalas, and then the end you conclude baruch to Hashem hamavdil ben kodesh l'kodesh. Chen amnach b'chasi mosa the end. Rashesh berei Davidio amar af b'psichasi. You begin hamavdil ben kodesh l'chol. They say, The less hilchas kavase, we don't rule like him. We actually do hamavdil ben kodesh l'kodesh, but you end of kodesh l'chol. Avdoisa ben kodesh chom l'kodesh kal. You say that after Motzei Shabbos, you say that the hamavdil between a stricter kodesh, which is Shabbos, to a lighter kodesh, which is Yom Tov. The less hilchas kavase, it's not nice to call Yom Tov a kodesh kal. Amar Abzeda says, especially you're making your yaknahaz, you're making kiddush, you're making it holy, and then you're saying it's not really, it's a light holy, it's like a bezoin. Amar Abzeda, Yom Tov Choli Bem Shabbos. What about Yom Tov on a Tuesday? How do you become dollar then? Do you still say Hamavdil ben Keizel? See, so yes. My Hamavdil ben Keizel l'chol. You say Keizel l'chol because it's a Tuesday. It was chol yesterday, Monday, and Sunday. So Tuesday night you can say Hamavdil Keizel l'chol. And then also more than that. The Yom Hashvi l'Sheisim Ma'aseh. Makes sense on Motzei Shabbos, you're about to start your 6 days. But you're on a Tuesday night. What are you saying? My time is, and nevertheless we do that. Why? Seder Havdolos who minor. That what you Seder Havdol, we have to have 7 Havdolos, so therefore you count the whole thing. And so on and so forth. Because we won't have 7 Havdolos. Or we had now Reb Sochen, different opinions how many of those you need to have. Okay, Hadna Loch Hakol Sheichtin, and tomorrow we start the new Perik. They have a good day.